Each week he wrote home to Mahfouz Azam, a pupil and a protege.
كان منفتح على العالم، إنما صدمته المادية المجتمع في أمريكا، لأنه وجد الناس تستمتع إن إنسان يقتل الآخر، يعني حتى في اللهو في الألعاب الرياضية، وشوف إن في البوكسينج في لعب البوكس أو في المصارعة والآخرين بيشربوا وياخدوا سعداء وياخدوا اقتلوا اقتلوا اقتلوا. كان بيشوف إن إزاي المجتمع ده بيستمتع بمسائل لا تتعلق بالإحساس الإنساني، وكان بيربط بين التقدم الفكري والحضاري وبين التقدم الإنساني.
These feelings came to a head at a dance in a church hall. As the gramophone played, the pastor dimmed the lights.
The dancing intensified. Arms circled arms, lips met lips, and the atmosphere was charged with love and lust.
He went there, he saw young people dancing, cheek to cheek, breast touching breast, as he describes in his memoir. And this is something that really seems to have turned him round completely. This really convinced him that Western society was hopelessly doomed and represented everything in opposition to the pure values of Islam. It was a sort of epiphanic moment for him. It was his moment of self-discovery.
Qutb returned to Egypt convinced that Western influence was reducing the Arab world to Jahiliyyah, a state of paganism which had existed before the birth of the Prophet Muhammad.
In classical Islamic writing, it's a word that is quite loaded. It's got the meaning of ignorance, but also arrogance. The arrogance of the pagans who won't acknowledge the truth of God, the truth of Muhammad's message. Qutb took this term and gave it a completely new definition. He describes as Jahiliyyah the contemporary social universe of Cairo, of Egypt, and indeed the modern world, which has been corrupted by Western materialism.
Sayyid Qutb ended up saying that a society can be outwardly Islamic, but still could be classified as a pagan society. What he put on the table was this idea that a society can profess to be Islamic, but could really be living in violation of Islam.
In Qutb's eyes, the only way to reverse this violation was to create an Islamic republic, governed not by man-made laws, but by the law of God. Qutb and his fellow Islamists would find themselves in conflict with Egypt's new secular rulers.
Ex-King Farouk has gone into exile, while the future of Egypt and her relations with the West are questions still to be resolved.
In 1952, a group of army officers carried out a coup d'etat. Egypt's new strongman was Gamal Abdel Nasser. His vision for Egypt and for the whole Arab world was secular, nationalist, and socialist. It was a vision that looked more to Moscow than Mecca. A botched assassination attempt gave Nasser the excuse to round up thousands of Muslim brothers. 6 were executed. Many others received long prison sentences. Amongst them, Sayyid Qutb. One of Qutb's interrogators was then a young police officer.
كان ناقم جدا على المجتمع وعلى الشعوب اللي كان بيتصور انها كانت لازم تصور عندما صدر عليه حكم بالسجن 15 سنة.
The man who today leads the Muslim Brotherhood was in prison with Qutb.
حينما يرى إخوانه واقعين تحت هذا التعذيب وهذا الظلم وهذا الإجرام يعني لا يحتملها إلا أولو العزم من الرجال. يعني أنا 3 أشهر تحت التعذيب حينما كان الدود ينخر في جسمي وكنت لا أستطيع أن أتحرك.
There were a group of Muslim brothers who were in prison with him, and they wanted to go on a strike. The prison authorities dealt with that by opening their cell door and shooting them down. Qutb was horrified, and he asked himself, what kind of Muslim would do this to another Muslim? He decided that they were not Muslims. In his mind, he excommunicated them.
This experience led him to write Signposts on the Road. Short, sharp, and simple, it was a call for Islamist revolution.
We cannot compromise with Jahiliyyah society. We can show it no loyalty. Islamic Jihad frees mankind from slavery to other men, so that he can serve God.
Qutb's life and ideas had enormous influence on the man who is today the deputy leader of Al-Qaeda. Ayman al-Zawahiri was born in 1951 in Cairo. Zawahiri grew up in the relatively prosperous suburb of Mahdi, part of an educated middle-class family. Mahfouz Azam, the man who had been Qutb's lawyer, was also Zawahiri's uncle.
كان شخص هادي، صلاته محدودة، إنما كان يقرأ كثير جدا، مثقف. وهو صغير كان بيقرأ كتب دينية وكتب سياسية، يعني فكر سيد قطب أو أي فكر آخر، وكان أيمن بيقرأ كل حاجة.
Syed Qutb was a family friend, and his trial and punishment had a tremendous effect on the teenage Ayman al-Zawahiri. In 1965, the Egyptian authorities had rearrested Qutb.
I've read these transcripts of his trial. Clearly, this was a man who knew he was going to be executed. He understood that the Nasser regime had picked him up again and had brought him to trial to murder him.
Everyone from Nasser down expected Qutb to appeal against his death sentence. But Qutb refused.
فكان رده أن فكري وأنا ميت أقوى مني حي، ورفض.
General Fuad Alam witnessed the execution.
كان منهار جدا أن الحكم بغير ما أنزل الله كفر. بيبلغ الناس إنه الحكم بغير القرآن يبقى كفر.
Qutb's martyrdom was a turning point for Ayman al-Zawahiri. Years later, he described it as the spark that ignited the jihad movement.
This young man joins the Islamic movement at 16. In the aftermath of the execution of Sayyid Qutb, he joins it when people were running away from it. They wanted to get out of harm's way. He wanted to get into harm's way. So there's something, it tells you about the willpower of Ayman Zawahiri.
In his writings, Zawahiri later quoted from a poem by Syed Qutb.
Brother, push ahead, for the path is soaked in your blood. Do not turn your head right or left, but look only up to heaven.
In 1967, Israel launched a preemptive attack on the 3 Arab armies that had massed on its borders.
On the 7th day of the 6-day war of 1967, when Abdel Nasser, the man worshipped by modern Arabs as being possibly the greatest Arab since the Prophet Muhammad, was defeated. Arab nationalism was devastated with him. This was the Waterloo of Arab nationalism.